Howdy, I'm Payton Smith, your social media producer over here at Paizo. I'm here with Joe Pasini again. It's nice to see you, man.
You too, bud.
Good to see you again. Everything. I think last time, what was the last thing we talked about?
Alien Archive 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, and definitely next time that we do one of these, I definitely want to make some characters with that. I don't know if chat might be interested with that. Trying to see how they might formulate together the characters and stuff. But today, we're here to talk about a gas giant. I think it's basically called Liavara.
That's
if I remember right. So I'm still a new Starfinder player. I've been dabbling into Starfinder recently, trying to learn better and better and everything else that we're going on. I think John Compton is still going to help me out, try to figure out more and more of the gameplay systems. But one of the things I've been looking for is that with every tabletop RPG, that's basically lore needs to be affiliated with it. You need to understand why things happen. You need to understand why certain areas have a purpose. And it's also for a good destination to understand, here's an interesting place that I can go to and possibly have an amazing adventure. And it's really nice that designers and developers are able to make us fantastic worlds. So tell me, what is Liavara?
I mean, you kind of just answered that first question, which like, yeah, I think why have places? You need places to be from in a galaxy and places to go to as well. And last time we talked about Alien Archive 3, that's going to come up again here because there are playable species in Alien Archive 3 that are from the moons of Liavara, which, as you said, is a gas giant. That there's not a lot of places to live on a gas giant necessarily. Liavara has a big domed city called Roselight that has all these transparent aluminum domes. That's really beautiful, at least for most species. They consider it beautiful. And then it has an old moon that got turned into a station for mining, because a gas giant is really useful for rare resources, especially Liavara. One thing about Liavara is it's not one of the packed worlds, which is the name of our core system setting. The solar system is called the Pact Worlds because they all got together to fight off an invasion that we don't talk about anymore. But Liavara is a protectorate of the Pact Worlds, so it's not an official member, and that's because Brethida, the other big gas giant in our system, looks after Liavara because there are these creatures called dreamers there. This really, now we're getting into it because
also did you bring a picture to show what Liavara?
Oh yeah, let's look at a map while I babble on. So here's Liavara. Thank you for that. There's Roselight up in the corner, top corner there. You can see really pretty and pink, and that's where there's a lot of commerce going on. That's also where they try to control the mining that goes on here, but you can't really ever do that. So Upwell, which is a little smaller and to the right of Roselight in the picture here anyway, none of this is to scale, of course, is a real like hard scrabble. I think of it as like, offshore oil derricks kind of, like it's just like real gritty and exposed wiring and stuff.
Maybe possibly like a bunch of scrap pirates and stuff like that, trying to trade in whatever parts have crash landed there.
Yeah, and ostensibly it's under the control of the people who are in charge here, but they look the other way quite often, in fact. And that used to be one of the shepherd moons, they're called. There's you can see on the map there are 5 major moons that I'd love to talk about, but there are tons and tons of smaller moons that we have talked about some a little bit, and then the rest are open kind of for everyone to figure out. And I wanted to talk about who lives in the gas part of this gas giant. So Barathu, which I didn't bring a picture of, they're from the first Alien Archive. They're one of the main playable races, even, I would say, for the Pact Worlds. They visited this planet a long time ago, before, like thousands of years ago. They came in their whale ships, their space whale ships, which they used to travel in.
Is it an actual living whale?
Oh, it was at the time, yeah. That doesn't happen as much anymore because we have better ships. Although sometimes there are some manufacturers that will find deceased space whales and turn their bodies into the frames of starships. But we don't need to talk about that. But so these Barathu came to this planet and checked it out. And the first ones here underwent this transformation into what we call dreamers. And those are these psychically kind of singing kind of space cadets that are just like floating around in this gas giant, and nobody knows what they're doing or why. And they're pretty peaceful, but if you mess with them, they will explode in psychic energy and mess you up pretty badly. There's also,
Now, and how do they interact with the galaxy, though?
That's a great question.
In large.
Well, they pretty much keep to this planet, although fans of Starfinder Society, our organized play program, might have met a dreamer or might have gotten some information from one at one point, because there is one elsewhere that the Starfinder Society kind of uses for information sometimes. But they're really enigmatic, and you can't really tell what's going on.
So they're very rare, basically. When you see one, it's like, it's nearly like the most, I don't know how the right analogy for space to use it. Like, you never will ever see these guys, only in like one rare legend you might have heard of one. Is it that kind of rare, or just like see one ever so 20 years maybe in someone's life?
You're probably not going to see one. And in fact, part of the protectorate status of this planet is like, stay away from the dreamers. The Baratheon are just like, please leave them alone. We don't know what they're up to, but we don't want you messing with them. And that's kind of part of the deal they've made with all these gas miners, because there's valuable resources here. So they sort of try to strike a balance with like, okay, you can, mine in these areas because that will have less of an ecological impact. There's also freaky looking space dragons flying around in this gas. So that have maws that they just annihilate people with, so that's fun. There's all sorts of critters in the gas giant itself, but we do have lots of other places. One thing people have asked, I think on the forums, was whether Baratheons, because they're still around and they're still on Brethida, the planet, when they visit, like, do they start changing into these weird dreamers? And it's unclear.
I apologize to interrupt you, because I'm still new to everything. In case someone else new maybe listening, what is Baratheus?
Baratheus is a jellyfish-looking creature. It's pink and purple. They can actually link up with other Baratheon and become these mega organisms. In fact, one, gosh, I'm blanking on the name, but it's just like basically a corporation that is a giant living organism made of tons of Baratheon. At the end of their life, they sometimes choose to link up with other ones. And one of the changes that they can go through when they become dreamers is losing that sort of ability to transform themselves and join up with other Baratheon. But back to the question no, that's good. I appreciate it. It's hard to keep track of like all the jargon and the super deep in-world stuff that I get super into. So I appreciate that. But it's not really clear whether you might turn it. I mean, if you're a player character and you go visit, you might start having psychic visions and start feeling a little strange. But and I'm sure there have been Baratheon who are like, I want to be a dreamer. I'm going to Liavara and just dive into that gas giant. Probably some
never
of them
to be seen again.
Yeah. And is that because they become dreamers, or is that because they get eaten by a Razant space dragon thing? So it's a good question. I think it's open to individual games.
Definitely a trial to try to become one. And I don't think in Starfinder in general, I don't think we've ever made a system to where it's like, here's what happens when you go to a dreamer. I don't think we've ever touched on that, correct?
Yeah, not exactly like that. We have touched on similar things like, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but
so past the dreamers and everything else, there's still the rest of this giant gas giant. So where does everyone else live on this gas giant?
Great question. They live in Roselight, which we talked about, and Roselight is going to see some more treatment. Crystal Fraser, one of our great contributors and helped create Starfinder from the jump. She wrote a bunch of cool stuff about Roselight that is coming down the line that I got to peek at, but I'll just leave it at, she's a great writer and really fleshed out this place and made it really interesting. And then this station Upwell, between the two, they have about a couple 100,000 souls living aboard them, and about a third of those are human, and then you've got androids and plenty of other, a mix of species that you might expect to find out here at this gas giant, mining primarily. And then, of course, the moons are very much populated, or at least most of them are. And then there are shepherd moons that we've talked about a tiny bit. And I actually have a mnemonic for remembering the 5 major moons.
You want to share that with us?
I really do. I've been weirdly excited about it, but it's not. I want people to guess, see if they can guess what they are. So,
well, I'm new, so chat, you need to help me out.
Yeah, we'll talk about the moons, and if you can figure out. Obviously, I use an initialism, so it's like the first letter of each of the 5 moons. I'm going to spell something out, and I'll tell you at the end. But I want to see if somebody in chat can figure it out.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do have a preview basically with the map and everything. With all the moons, and I unfortunately can't. We can't because we don't have a big enough screen yet. But it's like. I can't figure out this mystery, so chat, I'm going to need your help on this one. But further on, basically with the gas giant and everything else, you did touch on Roselight and Upwell. I don't know if you remember those specific places off the top of your head. So tell me like what the differences would be between Roselight and Upwell. Like is Roselight like a very fantastic, rich sort of looking city? Is it like a downtrodden sort of farming looking area? Or
Roselight is beautiful. At least I think I hinted at this before. And this isn't public information yet, but I'll share it with you and make it public, is just that a lot of the architecture was made to try to imitate Barathu architecture from Brethida, right? These beautiful jellyfish creatures, but beautiful to some, maybe not everyone, but beautiful to me, by God. But they kind of got it a little bit wrong. But to most species, it's
an affront to them, basically.
Yeah, so Barathu look at it and go like, that is like, you got that way off. That's not what that looks like. But everyone else is like, ooh, this is beautiful and gorgeous. And there is kind of that thing where, this is like the wealthy, rich city where all the muckety mucks live and pull strings and all that. And they might look down at Upwell as kind of the raggedy, but Upwell's where a lot of the actual resources are coming from. A lot of the money is coming.
Is it kind of like a mining town type of scenario?
Upwell's definitely a lot more hard scrabble where you are, you got to watch your back when you're hanging out in Upwell, I think, for the most part.
And I'm sorry for asking you a little nitty gritty things. It's actually interesting because I really like hearing like, oh, here's a station and it has this and this. Maybe it has like a gang that's trying to control some of these resources and try to, intimidate the various ship workers or something. Because I'm making a scenario in my head. So I'm getting more and more interested in it. So Upwell is pretty much a mining system. Do you remember what type of resources they've pretty much been gathering through there? Maybe might be a certain plot hook or something a game master for Starfinder might get into.
And that's kind of the intention even earlier on, and I should say that Crystal's article about Roselight includes a lot of stuff about Upwell as well. So you can we don't get into the specific gases, I think, but Liavara has some that aren't found anywhere else in this system, maybe even the galaxy, who knows. And we leave that open for GMs to have a MacGuffin that they can say like, oh, you've discovered this new kind of starship engine, and it only uses this one particular fuel, and the only way to get it is to go to Upwell and negotiate with some gang leader or something like that. So getting into specifics, I won't do that, but that's exactly why we write these kinds of things, is so the GMs have awesome stuff to use in their games.
So you did have a way to remember the moon, so let's go try to go through them together.
All right.
So what's the first moon that you mentioned that's basically orbiting all this?
Yeah, in my mnemonic, the first one I think of is Hallas, Hallas, and that is home to these creatures called the Halogen. And these are basically, they can look like what we see here. They're creatures of light and energy, and they are super weird, where you have the dreamers, no one really knows what they're up to. The Halogen seem to be content staying on their planet. Like they're a super evolved species, and they just want to hang out at home and watch Netflix, I guess. I don't know.
Is this one of those 5 million playable races that we have? Or
no, these are
pure NPCs.
This is NPC. Yeah, this is not a playable species, but they are, and they can be very dangerous as well if messed with. And in fact, a nearby moon, which we'll talk about in a second, put a magical force field around the whole thing, kind of hoping to, I think, protect both ways, both from people entering that place, which is super dangerous, and also to prevent them from getting out.
One of the things I'm actually quite curious about these creatures and stuff like that is who designed these creatures, for one?
Oh gosh. They're in Alien Archive, the first Alien Archive, which is a few years back now. So I'm blanking on who exactly wrote those, unfortunately. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry to put that on you.
No, that's good.
That's good. See what the design
that's a good question.
Of them were.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're able to talk a little bit on basically like what their intention were for basically being on this moon design-wise for the world. Like, was it a place to...
Well, so I know that when we wrote the core rulebook, we name dropped these sort of like creatures of energy and light. Yeah. And so when it came time to write the Alien Archive, we were like, well, let's make those a creature now.
Let's flesh them out and allow basically game masters and players even kind of mess around with them and try to make interesting stories around them.
Exactly.
And so Hallas is something that you've planned the sketch out and everything.
Yeah, so Hallas, right now it's a bit of a mystery. And kind of what we were talking about earlier, like what is Liavara to a new player? I was asking my teammates on the Starfinder team, like what is the coolest thing about Liavara to you? And Amanda Hammond very helpfully said they have stuff. And I was like, okay, thanks, Amanda. And then Jason Keeley said that it's mystery. Like Liavara is kind of the mystery planet. There's so many mysteries just about the Dreamers, about these halogen, about what's inside the gas of the gas giant, and some things we haven't talked about yet, but we are about to, just on these other moons, and even just all these shepherd moons, which are just tiny, basically rocks floating around in the rings of this gas giant. Some of them have ruins on them. Some of them have weird artifacts. Some of them have magical sites that don't make sense. So there's just so much to explore in this one planet, which is kind of cheating because it's got all these cool moons that have their own thing going on. But so in terms of like fleshing out this specific mystery of halogens and their planet or their moon.
And I don't think we really sketch them out everything. And are we leaving majority of these guys up to homebrewers and stuff like that? Or?
Yeah. We'll let people figure out what they want to do with them for now. I don't know of any plans to have the halogen adventure, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. Especially our organized play can do anything it wants, and that's exciting. Just
tell us on social media if you actually want these guys to get fleshed out or not. But but besides their planet, what would be the next planet?
Not
planet, next moon. My bad.
I call them planets too because they're so rich with like adventure hooks and stuff, and they are the kind of terrestrial places in this part of the setting. So the next moon is Arcanen, which is home to the Durindi and the Sazaron here, which thank you for that art. So this is a Sazaron. Last week, or no, a couple weeks ago when we talked about in Archive 3, we showed off their cohabitants of this planet, of this moon. See, I did it. Called the Durindi, and written by Hillary Murphy. But these are the Sazerons, written by Katina Davis, who's Paizo's web store coordinator. We kept it in-house for that one.
You saying she wrote this one?
Yeah, she wrote it, designed it, and wrote it. Basically, this was another thing where we sort of name dropped, like we like to do, because we like to set ourselves up to make cool things. We said, Katina, like, what are Sazerons like? And she actually worked with Hillary to come up with this sort of, because what we had said about these species was that they co-governed their moon together, and that's kind of all we said. And so there was some cool co-working there where they figured out that the Sazerons here are kind of the serious, studious. They make sure everything gets done on their planet, like. They're the ones that take care of business, basically, and the Durindi are having fun. Like
it's just a giant planet of bureaucracy at that point.
A little bit, it can be, yeah. And the Durindi are the ones that, if we remember, zap people. So the Sazerons have kind of gotten used to that. I think they might even have electricity resistance as a result, mechanically. Just like, look, we're used to them shocking us for no apparent reason, but whatever. That's just how they do. And the other really cool thing about Arcanen that I probably should have led with is that it bleeds its atmosphere off as it orbits this planet.
And what effect would that have on all the other moons and the planet itself?
Like many creatures, they need air to breathe. And so, fortunately, and incredibly, the planet dives through the gas giant Liavara and picks up atmosphere periodically during its orbit. It like goes into the planet. And this creates huge storms, and they're actually
I would imagine there comes so many natural disasters with gravity and everything.
Well, yeah, they do have these pillars that collect electrical energy and actually power their whole planet for the ensuing period and help keep some of the atmosphere there. And then and it's interesting, they have like a kind of culture of celebrating that sort of cycle of like.
We survived and did not hit the rest of the gas giant.
Exactly. There's like a period of Hillary goes into this in her article about the Durindi, I think, in Alien Archive 3, which just came out last week, by the way. And the Sazaron are from that book as well, so you can learn more about them too. And both are playable species, so I think it'd be cool to have a party where you had one of each, and they're just kind of both from Arcanen, this movement of Liavara.
And besides the party that basically happens with the cycle that goes through it, even though they might celebrate and stuff like that, obviously having a planet go completely through a gas giant and stuff like that, and obviously might have some other side effects. Would there possibly be something, maybe potentially add something for a future adventure path we might think about? I'm not saying anything. Like, I'm not guaranteeing anything. I don't know what they're making yet.
I mean, that's
that basically... would it be interesting to have it to where, as they go through the gas giant and stuff, it might affect some of the local wildlife, or do you think the wildlife on that moon has basically adapted to basically from years and upon years of this going through the gas giant may have turned into something weird at all?
Yeah.
Or do you think it might have just kind of worked itself out in some weird way.
Those are the kind of things we love to think about, and exactly why we set ourselves up this way. It's like we come up with these, either we start with creatures and think about what effect they might have on the environment, or the environment and what effect that might have on creatures and culture. And then, we just drop it in there. We have our writers do that, and we ask them to come up with interesting hooks for GMs and players. And then in future books, we can expand on it, just like we did with these creatures here. I think the answer to your question is, yeah, I bet there are some creatures that have evolved. I bet there's some that are like in mid-process and haven't. And there's probably some that, since the Sazerac and Dorindy have been there so long, they probably like protect certain species from it. Maybe even ones that they've brought onto the planet since, or something like that.
Yeah, so probably brought them into some shelters or some genetic mutation of them.
Oh, sure.
So they can actually survive. So they don't have to spend so many resources keeping them there.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if they have to farm any of them, stuff like that. But even next up with that, is there anything else? I know you touched on some of it a little, some of this a little bit with the Alien Archive 3. Is there anything else from Liavara's Moons that's in Alien Archive 3 that you'd like to highlight? Yeah,
there's more. If we go to the next piece of art here, this is an Orokoroi, which is from another moon of Liavara called Osoro, Osoro. I'm just spelling it to help the people trying to guess the acronym. So Osoro is think of a bunch of mountains in a huge sea, but instead of water, the sea is toxic gas. So Orokoroi are these monsters that live in that gas and sometimes attack settlements. And Osoro, also going back to the Dorindy, which we talked about briefly, some of them live here too. They from Arcanon, they settled this moon a long time ago and have even adapted, like physically have changed given their time on this moon. They're a little more hardscrabble than their sort of like more lighthearted cousins on the other planet. See, I did it again. I called it a planet. It's a moon.
Dude, I would do the same thing. Like, it's from other genres and everything I've seen. Normally when you get something and make it look like it's a continent, but it's technically an island because it has its own thing going. You want to call it a country. So don't worry. I think I'm with you on this one.
Thank you. And then so Liz Liddell wrote these Rokuroi, which again were another name drop where we just said like these spiral winged things that attack Janosro. That's it. And then Liz went ahead, and she's our senior editor, if I didn't mention that. She wrote this for Alien Archive 3, which I also want to mention, like, I've seen a lot of positive feedback for Alien Archive 3's like fun playable races. Like we have one that looks like an otter, and we have some others. And I've seen like
that's up on YouTube, by the way. So if you guys want to go and see, we even show off the otter on screen.
Yeah, we do.
Everything else.
And like I'd say maybe 1 to 10% of people have been like, oh, there's too many like cutesy things. Well, I mean, we've just shown you like dinosaur people, these Orokoroi monsters, and then the next piece of art we have is from another moon of Liavara. These are philosopher worms, which once again are something that we've talked about briefly in previous books, but now we have a full entry in Alien Archive 3 out last week, friendly local game store, etc. And the former creative director of Starfinder wrote this one, James Sutter. So that was pretty exciting to get him kind of back in the mix, and he hasn't like left the mix. He wrote one of our Dawn of Flame APs, for example,
which I think next week we're actually going to be sitting down and talking with him for Dawn of Flame.
That's awesome.
Like that. I think him and I think Jason Keeley will be here next week for Starfinder Wednesday and everything else, talking about that. But I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's good. That was legit an accidental good plug that I didn't mean to do, but I'm glad it happened.
Good job.
So these are these philosopher worms are kind of, again, enigmatic, mysterious. The kind of themes of Liavara here. They are close to what they call the Forever Queen, who they think is the incarnation of a god called Hylax, the goddess of friendship and some other things. But
I feel there's a twist.
I mean, maybe. And I didn't mention the moon that these live on, which is Nchak, Nchak. So Nchak. And this is basically a bug moon. There's all kinds of bugs on this moon. And philosopher worms hang out with Shirins, which are the core bug species of our setting. And then Trox also. People might recognize them from Pathfinder. They got updated kind of to Starfinder in Alien Archive 2. And they kind of serve as bodyguards and diplomats and kind of evangelists for the faith of Hylax out in the broader galaxy, but also here on Nchak. And these philosopher worms, they can extrude this like blue jelly that has like motes of light in it that if you drink it, you can get a glimpse of the future. But they don't just like hand that stuff out. They can do it like once a month. And so if you do them a real solid, then they might give you some of their blue goo to drink, and you might.
That gives me an entire adventuring hook.
Yeah, exactly.
Of a giant mechanical corporation who finds out about this and starts basically farming them at this point, and it's terrible, and you have to either come in and save them, or if you just don't like them and you're a bunch of evil characters, you can even help farm it more and then get a bunch of future juice.
Well, and you'd have to be strong at that point, because they're going to have a bunch of trucks protecting them. There's going to be a bunch of Shirins who won't let you get near them, and they themselves get pretty huge, like I forget exactly, but like at least 8 feet long and hundreds of pounds. So I wouldn't mess with them personally for the
anything with a good enough blaster could take
that's fair enough.
Any problem.
There's some good heavy weapons out there. Yeah, so let's see. We've talked about Arcanen. We've talked about Osoro. That's the toxic sort of moon, toxic gas sea moon. We have Nechak. What else?
Do you know how any of the other races kind of help deal with these types of creatures? Like, what's the relationship between these creatures along with all the other ones in this area? Because they have their own moon, right?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are, like, the Shirin are a relatively new addition to the Pact Worlds, they're pretty friendly in general and curious, and they really like making choices and doing cool new things. But so they get along pretty well with the adherents of the goddess of friendship. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like a total love-in, but everybody's kind of on their own journey and figuring it out together. And
so there's no political tension or military tension at all.
I would never say no tension, especially, but I think they get along pretty well. There's always going to be competing interests, right? And like, how do we best serve the Forever Queen? And is the Forever Queen really an incarnation of the god Hylax? Like, who knows? You know, there's going to be disagreement on that, and that's probably where you can get into some interesting story stuff if you visit with your party.
And so further from that, that's 4 moons, right?
Yes.
Unless I miscount.
No, you're right. You're right. No, yeah, I was just trying to figure it out, and I've forgotten poor. I don't know how to pronounce this one. It starts with an M. I'm gonna go with Milos, because I think that's funny and I like it.
I think you mentioned this to me before, and I wanted to call it Milos.
Yeah, and that's just straight out.
Like I have a stepchild or something.
That's absolutely not going to work, because it's Melos, and I don't know. I can't wrap my head around that one. But
we need to call
Rob. We can call it whatever. Yeah, Rob.
What is it?
Rob's not in the office today, so we couldn't get a final ruling on this from our creative director. But I'm going to go with Milos. I think Melos also makes the most sense, probably. But that is the 5th moon, 5th major moon of Liavara, and this one is the most mysterious of the mysterious, because again, thousands of years ago, even before the gap that sort of wiped everyone's memory and is an unreliable like period of history, even before that, the entire population of this moon just disappeared. And so it's just these empty cities of this species that no one knows anything about, except some think that, they call this event the Taking, and some think it was, a horrible disaster, a catastrophe of some kind, whereas some other people think it was, like a transcendence of some kind. And so you have people now who want to recreate it even, and say like, we want to do what they did and transcend this plane or something. And everyone else is like, what are you talking about? This is a dead moon. So there's just like infinite possibility for adventure there. You could really set kind of almost any adventure where you're looking at just a whole city, like a place where everyone's just gone, everyone just left suddenly, all the cars in the street kind of thing. Like,
and I assume there's no evidence.
There's no evidence of where they went or what happened to them exactly.
I think there's one Starfinder Society player who I think I met him at Gen Con. He dressed up like a gnome, I believe. Okay. I think there's gnomes in Starfinder, correct?
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah.
So, and basically, I loved his outfit at Gen Con. And he was telling me about his character, in which there should be a video coming out hopefully next month and stuff like that. I still have to find time in the schedule to get it all together. That we interviewed him, and apparently his character is investigating the gap and everything else. So hopefully, maybe if we release something, his character will be able to figure out what happened.
We'll see. The gap's tricky. We use it a lot to hand wave things, but it's also, there's a lot of possibility there for sure.
So what about the Shepherd Moons that you mentioned before?
Right. I did, I was looking at the Pact Worlds book we have, which talks about a fair number of them. And there's just like all kinds of different stuff going on in them. But I think one of our in-house favorites for the Shepherd Moons is Hib, which is a moon that has these fellas and fellettes and non-binary fells, bantrids. So they are...
Describe this creature to me, please.
I mean, it's clearly a giant nose. If you heard that sound, it was Jason Keeley and Rob McCreary screaming, "No, it's not a nose." But I look at that and I see a nose.
Just have to start rushing over to the studio now to open the door. Like, stop it!
But yeah, exactly. Jason Keeley wrote these, and he has admitted that he wanted them to be weird. Like, he wanted to make as weird a species as he could.
Yeah, not everything has to be a humanoid.
Yeah, and Hib's a particularly strange case because these creatures about 5 years ago in the setting just woke up from stasis. And we're like, well, here we are. We don't remember why we went into stasis. What are we doing here in this new system? Like, wow, the galaxy is amazing. And they roll around on these organic like spheres that are their feet, basically. They just cruise around everywhere. Rob was playing.
What is their top speed?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. 400 miles per hour in a starship.
I'm sorry.
I love that question. Let's see. Rob played one in a game here at work, and he was always on a roller chair, and just like because these bantrids always want to roll around, like they gotta keep moving. Probably,
I can just imagine him like just pulling his chair wherever he needs to move.
Yeah,
like,
he was constantly moving in his rolly chair. It was pretty funny. But they are. And they're playable species too. I should mention they're from the Pact Worlds book. In the back of Pact Worlds, you can play one of these if you want, like Rob did. And if you're a fan of these, you might want to keep an eye out because they could be rolling into a future product. So that's all I'll say about that.
Do you want to talk more about them? Because I actually want to talk about that. I mean, honestly, because I like to talk about the design of basically like creating some of these aliens and stuff like that. What might go into the creative process in it. That normally, like, from what I imagine, from perspective and stuff, is that basically everyone hops into a meeting and pretty much go, we need to think of fantastical and awesome and amazing creatures that we know people will like, but we also need to have enough variety and stuff like that. And then, basically someone might yell out something that's going like space whale that causes depression. And then all of a sudden you have this demonic, Stygian abyss looking whale that arrives at planets to make everyone go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think I might have mentioned this at the Alien Archive talk we had, but during one of those brainstorms, we had someone yell out psychic vampire meteor, Fae. And now we have that. It's called Ligualid, and it pretends that it's going to crash into your planet. It looks like a meteor from far away. Freaks everyone out, feeds off that fear, and then goes, never mind, and takes off.
I was like, no, I'm good.
Sometimes it can happen just like that. But I personally, I'm the lead designer for Starfinder, and I do a lot of work making sure that we have a good spread of kind of, like, for instance, creature types. If we did all dragons, then it would get kind of stale. Well, all dragons would be kind of cool. But if it were all humanoids and monstrous humanoids, it would get a little stale. If we only did CR, so challenge rating is how we measure the difficulty of a monster to face. And if you're an early level player, if you're just starting out with your character, you're not going to be able to face things more than, CR 1 to maybe 5. But we want to have challenge ratings for everybody. So our book goes up, our system goes up to 25. So in Alien Archive 3, we put a CR 25, like the hardest thing you could possibly fight in the game in there, just to hit that last little bit of the sort of chart.
And that's my favorite thing in that entire book.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I would love to see, maybe at PaizoCon, we'll do a combat with one, see how many people we can wipe out. But yeah, we look at all kinds of, and we even look at creature type by CR. We look at as much as we can to get as many people as we can the things they need to have an interesting game of Starfinder, and that includes playable species too. We want to see so we added a playable swarm species. We added I'm talking about Alien Archive 3 now, but that's because you can't stop me. I talk about species, yeah. But you were asking about creature design, and I mean it's pretty true of setting design as well. Like with Liavara, we have lots of needs that we need to meet. We want to help GMs have places that they can take their players, and we want players to have places they can be from or be interested in as their characters. And that's just as important with setting stuff as it is with mechanics. So
apparently Owen has a question for you.
Oh, Owen. Is this Owen Casey Stevens, former Starfinder lead designer?
Like lovely human. Unfortunately, I didn't get to have enough time to really sit down and get to know him. But from everything that I've heard from the office, like everyone absolutely loved him.
I mean, I learned from him so much. We sat next to each other, and I probably every day I would be like 3 times a day, I'd be like, Owen.
Owen, and he do?
Almost always would talk to me.
But he does have a question for you.
Oh, great.
What has surprised you about being the Starfinder lead designer now?
How little time there is for every last thing. That's a good question. That's a joke. I'm not surprised at how little time there is for everything. Let me think on it. Let me think on that. What has surprised me? My God.
Yeah, and
very,
also
very little, Owen, because you prepared me for pretty much everything. Hanging out, working with you, definitely taught me a lot about what was expected of a lead designer and the kind of responsibilities. Watching people kind of walk up to Owen and be like, "How does this very specific thing work in this very specific situation?" And the thing I learned from Owen that you should all take if you're interested in this kind of thing is open up a book and read what the rules are, because it's really easy to get used to. I find this with a lot of games. I play a lot of board games too and other RPGs, and it's easy to think you remember a rule and just apply it. But then if you actually look it up, it's like, oh, that's not how that actually works. And it doubly so when you're working on making it, because you remember 3 versions ago and maybe 2 versions ago. So you really need to see what actually got printed and shipped to the public.
What is actually now gospel at this
Yes,
point.
exactly.
Which brings up another question and stuff is that, and also, by the way, chat, if you want to go ahead and ask us any questions and stuff like this, do @officialpaizo on the Twitch chat. It'll highlight as red for me, and then from there we can actually see what questions you want to ask. But one of the other ones that I kind of have that's kind of listed here, whenever you're making these types of stuff, because obviously Liavara basically had to have a design goal and stuff like that. It's why are we making this type of system? And normally when you guys sit down and kind of make stuff like this, what is the process and reason for needing it now and stuff like that? And as you kind of go through the process, is what kind of goes through your mind? It's we need this moon to basically do for this, for this reason. We need this moon to kind of give the players the option to explore this type of thing. Or is it basically saying we had a lot of fantastic ideas that we think game masters can use as a tool? Let's go ahead and see if we can apply some of those amazing ideas that have just been either on the back burner or kind of on the cutting room floor. Let's try to salvage what we got. How can you describe that process for me?
Yeah. So Paizo, when we start out with a book, we decide what's going in it. This might seem, we'll get rudimentary here because it's not obvious.
It might sound simple, at all. But there's a lot of process that still goes on with it.
So we know, for instance, and I was an editor when this book was being written and developed, the core rule book, I should say. So a lot of these initial seeds were planted, and on top of that, this solar system that is the basis of our setting existed in Pathfinder. It was in a campaign setting book that James Sutter, I believe, wrote that established this solar system that is very much like the Earth solar system, funnily enough. So that Liavara has some similarities to Saturn, you might notice, in that it has rings, for instance, and is a gas giant, of course. So in some ways we're kind of locked into certain things. It is a gas giant. The gap didn't change it into some kind of toroid world or something weird. But then we can look at, what, like you were talking about, what do we want GMs to have access to? And then a lot of it gets left up to the writers. So we have really great writers here, a lot of internal people. I think everyone I mentioned today almost was internal. And of course, a lot of non-internal people that really understand kind of Starfinder's direction. And we want this cantina galaxy filled with basically everything that a science fantasy setting could have. So that you can pick your flavor basically and combine them as you like. But what was I saying? Oh yes. So we start with this sort of bones of what we need and what we want, and then we often will leave it up to the writer and say, we've said these 3 things about this world. Fill in kind of the blanks. Tell us more about the history. We know this happened at this time. We know when the Bantrids woke up was 5 years ago, but what have they been up to since? And how do they feel about suddenly not knowing where they came from?
Has the galaxy as a whole influenced them at all?
Yeah.
And if you decide to go that direction story-wise, how would that affect them later on and all that other stuff? And which I find that really interesting. I find that really interesting and everything else. And also, Chad has some amazing questions. If you don't mind if we kind of
let's do it.
And It's one of the things I like to do, especially when I game master with all the RPGs that I've done before all of this.
Yeah.
Is that basically trying to find the reasons. It's like, if the players did this, or if the players are doing this, and there's a whole nother world that's out there, what happens in the years that the players are from here? There's got to be some reasons.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to hear, like, this is what happened to this entire race over the course of the lore.
And because we have all these playable species, like that happened to your character species. Like, why? What?
It's like, if it's similar, like, how much does that character care?
Yeah, exactly.
They make a lot of interesting stories.
Totally.
And John, I'm actually going to get to your question a little bit later on in the stream. But if you had to roll a character from Liavara right now, which place would you most want your character to be from?
I think I'd have to go with a Bantrid. So the Shepherd Moon of Hib. I think I'd want to have woken up there 5 years ago and kind of, find myself in the galaxy and roll around a lot. And
for new people like me, explain that world a little bit for me.
Hib, there's not much we say about Hib. Leaving it a little bit open. Like I said, you might look to the future and learn. We might be telling people a little bit more about it. It's pretty open, but I mean, there's a lot of ramps because these are. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's like a real thing. But otherwise, a Shepherd Moon is like just a really tiny rock generally. See, you almost got me to be spoilery.
Sorry, I tried.
Cheating.
I tried to help for chat. My bad.
It's a close one. I almost said it.
We do have another question though.
Okay.
That who else has rented a dreamer to come hang out in their basement, like the Starfinder Society has? Any neat stuff, prophecy tech, etc. These rented dreamers have given to the galaxy. Which is kind of a two question, but
yeah, I can take both those parts. So we don't know the arrangement the Starfinder. I mean, I personally don't know the arrangement the Starfinder Society has with the Dreamer that might be in their basement or not. Spoilers for Society play. And in terms of like what kind of stuff have they given to the galaxy? Well, people have come and taken things. People have come and
acquired.
They've investigated. They've snuck past the defenses of the Protectorate. The people trying to protect dreamers on Liavara and in Liavara from being exploited or being messed with, basically. But they have some people have been able to synthesize sort of. There's a drug actually. There are rules for a drug in Alien Archive 2. Liz Liddell wrote the Dreamer entry for that book. Again, senior editor. She and we have Dream Snuff, I think, is what it ended up being called, which is a drug you can take that sort of simulates some of the effects of Liavara's psychic energy on you and trips you out a little bit.
And Owen, I'm actually grab your question here in a second, but another follow-up question for it.
Yeah.
Which, if you can't answer this, you've released rules and corruptions in your Signal of Screams adventure path.
Yeah.
Would becoming a dreamer fall into a corruption, or does the Barathu have more consent in the matter? Also, can other races become dreamers?
That's a good question.
I'm sorry if I butchered your question.
No, that's what is that, a 3-parter? Let's see. We've got so other races, other species do experience weird psychic phenomenon when they visit Liavara, like the Liavara proper.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily turn into dreamers because that if you see the art, it's very much like a palette swapped Barathu. That's a little, I think, bigger and a little bit different, but certainly there are physiological and psychological effects on other species as well who spend a lot of time there. Again, that's not too many species. Do you remember the first part of that question? Because I have blanked on it.
I mean, you have it right there on the screen.
Let's see. Let me read it quietly to myself.
Here, you release. I can read it for you.
Oh, the corruptions. It's funny you mentioned the corruptions because that I was thinking of that earlier and almost mentioned it because we do have systems that talk about this kind of thing. And I want to really quickly say the consent part of the corruption system also is consent super important in that system in terms of like the players at the table and whether they want to use that system. That's totally a thing. And then. I could see you hacking that to do a kind of Barathu to Dreamer thing if you wanted, but that's more of a horror style adventure, and I think it wouldn't necessarily work the way you wanted it to, but I'm never going to say no to like homebrew rules that are cool.
And Owen gave you a question again.
What
did he learn about nature and travel from walking with the whole Appalachian Trail that is applied to things he has created for Starfinder?
Absolutely nothing. I would say the thing, so Owen is referencing the fact that I hiked the Appalachian Trail, which you can't get me to shut up about normally, but on a stream about a gas giant doesn't seem that relevant. Although I will say that doing that, it sounds like this thing where you go off by yourself and do this cool thing.
You went on a spirit quest?
You kind of, that's what I thought I was doing. But what I learned about that directly applies to this job of creating cool stuff. Especially I've been naming singular authors, right? For stuff, I said like this person wrote this and that person wrote that. It takes a ton of people. That was true on the Appalachian Trail. Like so many people helped me out, fed me, housed me, gave me advice, hiked with me, whatever. Same here at Paizo. We have so many people making this stuff, and even people who aren't directly involved in writing it or developing it or designing it or outlining it, then those are all different people. There's the art, people ordering the art, people making the art. There's the people in the warehouse who ship it. There's the people in customer service who get you your book fixed if something's wrong with it. Well, they don't fix your book; they just send you a new one. But you know what I mean. And
I'll be in the back just duct taping in.
Yep, exactly. Marketing. There's like a stream we do that takes at least one person to make happen. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah. And I'm missing a ton of people. So that's what I would say is the direct correlation is that it's fun to kind of assign, and I have my name on an AP volume on the front. But there's a ton of names inside the book, and they're all just as important. So,
and for the quick question, is that an NPC codex in the works? Someone decided to ask.
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a fantastic question.
Thank you for that question.
And I know it's a little Rolls question, but I actually want to kind of turn this into a slight discussion and stuff. Is that Cinderbite asks, playing Starfinder for the first time. He's 3 sessions in, and fantastic to have you.
Yeah.
He's playing an android mechanic with a drone. Do drones have microphones for recording remotes or for recording remote for audio / spying? He hasn't seen any modules for sound / audio.
I believe there's a camera module, and I would assume, and this is me talking off the cuff, like I think I said earlier, I learned from Owen, you grab the book and you read it. I'm not going to do that on stream. I've been told not to flip through books on stream, so which is a fair point. I would assume the camera would have a microphone on it.
I mostly bring that up because is those types of questions that normally when I would be given those types of questions and stuff, especially from my players. I don't see it in the book.
Yeah.
Normally, majority of these books are a guideline.
Yes.
So if you ever have these types of questions and other people in the future and stuff, what I recommend for you is just ask your game master, hey, can I have a microphone on that? Normally, if I know I would basically go yeah, you have a microphone with your drone. Yeah. And then you just have one.
Yeah.
It's if you don't really see it inside the book initially, just say you have one and then take some time off in your day or on your off time when you're not playing to basically come in and go, oh, hey, look, I have here's the actual rules for it, or there are no rules for it yet or anything else like that. Just kind of just have your game master kind of take control of it and figure out a solution with your game master. It's still your game, and you can have as much fun with it as you want, and you can nearly put anything you want in it.
That's super important. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier with, I'm not going to say no to things in homebrew. Where it gets trickier is if you want to do an organized play character, we do try to make even the playing field for everyone and have everyone on the same page so that there's no single person who's just super tuned their character to do everything and everyone else just watches them play, because that's not what it's about really. But if you're at home and you should talk to your game master, if you're the game master, talk to your players and just figure out what you want out of the experience and do it. And these are books full of really cool, really interesting, mechanically balanced suggestions that we call rules. At least that's my take on it. So.
And back to John's question that I told you I was get back to it. For that, let me scroll up for it. And gosh, dang it. The thing's messing with me now. Can we hear more about Joe's background and how he got to where he is today? I mean, obviously this position you're in is still new to you and everything else.
Sure.
From the graceful Owen, who's now
gone forever.
That basically this is now your new position and everything else. So people can understand you more and basically how you're affecting the game and all that. How did you get to this position? Or if you want to give a quick bio.
Sure. Gosh, it's been a weird path that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I've worked a lot of strange jobs, but the sort of consistent thread throughout my life has been an interest in language and games. And I was kind of a latecomer to RPGs, so I like to think of people. There's a lot of people who kind of cite their length of involvement in role-playing games as a sort of credit or like.
I'm a veteran of 20 years.
Yes, I've been playing for X number of years, or running games, or even designing it. And Owen is a great example of someone who has been doing it for 20 plus years, but never really
boast about it.
Yeah, it's not like something he lords over people. It's something he's always
very gracious and polite.
Yeah, and there's always more to learn. And I think that's what you learn from that long experience is like, yeah, you're never going to know everything. You got to keep trying stuff. From the opposite side of the coin, for me, I'm new, so I don't have all these sort of preconceived notions about like what stats should be, or that's a very vague thing I just said, that there should be like 6 stats, like strength and dex and con and all that. And so I get to look at things from a little bit of a fresher perspective. Although I say that now, I've been in RPGs for a few years. In terms of how I got into it, I think cutting it off somewhat recently, I was a game tester at Nintendo, and that turned into being a text editor for as a contractor with Nintendo. Then I did some contract work for Paizo as an editor. Then I joined full-time Paizo.
And then they got you.
Well, and then, we were short a dev and a developer. My team was sick of me, and they're like, hey, you want to be a developer? So they offloaded me to the development farm, and I learned some chops there from Amanda Hammond and Adam Daigle, who are awesome mentors. They're managing developers now, and they brought me up and taught me the right things to do. And in the meantime, I was still talking to Owen and a bunch of designers and everybody, learning as much as I could, because I just love spreadsheets, man. I really do. And
I have a game for you.
Oh, yeah.
It's in space.
Yeah.
And it does have ships.
I've said something now twice that makes me remember that I promised a mnemonic for these planets. Dang it.
I was saving that
for these moons.
last.
Oh, you were saving. All right, fine.
No, but we can do it now. That's fine.
Has anybody guessed
the surprise?
Has anybody guessed it, or what's the deal? Like, do we have any guesses?
I think there were some people in chat who tried to make it, but what is the method that you use to remember all those giants that we were just talking about?
Hollis, Arkanen, what did I go with? Milos?
It's your thing, man.
Yes. Osoro.
I didn't remember anything.
Osoro and Nachak, which is Hamon, which is Hammond, the last name of our managing developer for Starfinder.
That's actually pretty cool. It's a fun little Easter thing.
And that's definitely not on purpose. Amanda was totally involved with it. Well, now that I'm wondering about that, but no, it predates Amanda's involvement with Starfinder. Or I should say, it predates the naming of those moons is the main point. But it's really cool that our managing developer's last name happens to be the moons of Liavara, and that helps me for things like this.
That works out awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. One person, Peyton, how much time do we have left to submit an evil character and all that? You send me whenever. Keep sending me characters till the end of time. Just you can do it at official Paizo on Twitter and stuff. You can just send it there and be like, hey, I met a character. And then you can just send me a link there.
Real quick, that's another thing that as a newbie-ish to this industry, I love hearing about characters. Like, you hit me up on Twitter anytime or in person or whatever. I really, like, I just hear a lot of people saying, like, oh, I'm tired of hearing about characters. It's not everybody, but I love it still. And I want to know what species you are, because you have so many to pick from. I want to know what class and like what's cool about your character. So.
Yeah, if you have fan art of your character, showing off your character, things like that.
You have
like a story about it and stuff like that.
Fan art is cool too.
Send it to us on social media. I actually want to hear about all of your Starfinder stuff and everything else.
Me too.
There's been several artists I've found on social media and stuff like that who've been working really hard. They invested a lot in their characters, and I would love to like kind of retweet it and kind of like the pictures whenever I have time to go through our entire feed and stuff like that. I'd love seeing that stuff. I'd love seeing creations from our community. That first map of Liavara that we showed by Damien Mamaliti, he won an award for his work in that book. Yeah, and he does. I think all our Starfinder maps are a great majority of them, and he does incredible work. Like, and I see the sketches we send him, so I know how good his final product is compared to some of the stuff that we send him. Yeah, in our haste to get things done. So So one thing I want to do is one last question. Then we're going to start ending it off here. Cool. And everything else. So let's kind of look through Twitch chat here. Let's see. Looking at the cellophooms and the rules for pressure, are there any indication with ships flying into a thick atmosphere or underwater? I know it's a very specific rules question. That's very specific. Yeah, sorry. One of those types of questions, by the way. Main reason is that we're probably not going to answer it here on stream, mostly because he would have to look it up and to make sure that he answers it correctly. Because one of the things I don't want to do is answer you on live stream, potentially get it wrong.
Sure.
And then someone may clip this and kind of take it as gospel.
Yeah.
And then we go, oh no, we messed up. And then because we didn't properly research it. And to research it, flip through a bunch of books on stream, always an issue.
Yeah.
What's up, Dan? Thank you for subscribing, man.
Wow.
So with that, and everything else, and we want to actually answer you a lot better. So go ahead to our forums. We do have a rules section on our forums.
Yeah.
And for those type of questions, list them down. If we don't get to them immediately, we can at least have them in.
And there's a great community that'll jump in, and if there's answers printed in the books, they'll cite you the page and quote it for you. It's great.
And other people can either help you out and stuff like that, or whenever some of our designers and developers may have time to look at it. Sometimes they'll help out whenever they have time, but
I'm definitely looking at those and trying to carve out as much time to help people out as possible.
Yeah, and with that, I do believe we're going to start ending it off here and everything else. So for one, thank you so much for talking about me about Liavara and everything else. I definitely want to dive more into it, and whenever I start making my own Starfinder adventure and everything else, like not for us, but for my home group and stuff like that. You don't get my amazing
Very
adventure.
Selfish.
That I really, really want to explore more about it, and I think next time we're also going to be talking about the Crucible Flame Adventure Pass and stuff like that. I think Jason Keeley and Mr. Tondra will also be here talking about it. So with that, for one, Dan, it's good to see you in chat. I hope you're doing fantastic. By the way, go visit Sirenscape for some Starfinder sound stuff like that. I think, Dan, you still have permissions and stuff. Go and put down that Sirenscape link and everything else so people can go and get some Starfinder sounds for their games and everything else. So with that, everybody, thank you all so much. I appreciate all of you coming over. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Ben.
And we will see you next time.